Afternoon, everyone. A very warm welcome. Our guest of honor has helped us all look better and feel fitter. He is the founder chairman of Marico, Mr. Harsh Mariwala. Thank you, sir. It's an honor to have you with us today. This event is a part of our consumption story series, as this is a sector that has a healthy demand regardless of the economic situation. And our guest has a very inspiring journey to share with us today. This online forum and all our events wouldn't have been possible without our founder mentors, Mr. Vishnu Dhanuka and Mr. Sanjay Bhuvania, who took care of our financial wellness through Millennium MAMS, which is 28 this year. They believed in women as change makers, and today our image is as self-confident and financially independent women is largely due to their invaluable contribution. As continuous learners, we are constantly upgrading our knowledge so that we can seize investment opportunities. We do factory visits, we attend AGMs, and meet the industry heads to understand the macroeconomic situation. We took a trip to Omaha twice to attend the AGM of Berkshire Hathaway and to listen to the legendary investor, Mr. Warren Buffett. Seeing 40,000 investors under one roof was quite an experience for us. Our guest of honor today is a graduate from Sydenham College in Mumbai. Mr. Mariwala is an innovator, and he dived into the consumer products business by taking Parachute coconut oil to the next level. Saffola refined oil too was given a healthy boost by Mr. Mariwala. Maybe oil is well that starts well. He understood the difference between B2B and B2C when these concepts were not buzzwords. It was only natural for him to buy Nihar from HUL, and Livon and Setwet were the smart bets he took when he bought these brands from Reckitt Benckiser. He strengthened his presence in the fitness segment with Saffola Fitify, and Indians decided to fortify their health with Fitify. It's no wonder Mr. Mariwala is a fitness enthusiast. Am I right, sir?
Absolutely. 2 hours a day.
Who gyms daily. He plays golf on weekends. He's also an avid squash player. Swimmer.
No, I stopped playing golf. Squash I stopped playing. Sorry.
Okay. Swimmer. Swimming, sir?
Yeah, swimming every day.
Fencing and trekking. No wonder Marico is reaching new heights. Strong hair is only possible if the true roots are strong with the hair and care regimen from Marico. Revive the color in your clothes and make your hair livelier with Medica. Make your skin glowing and smooth with Kaya Youth. The icing on the cake, our lives have become sweeter thanks to the newly launched Saffola Honey. Thank you, sir, for helping the India stories shine and glow. And we welcome you and request you to present the keynote address and share your journey, vision of the company, importance of leadership roles, and your views on the economy in light of pandemic. Sir, we welcome you, and over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Rachna, and good afternoon to all of you. Very happy to be here with all of you. And I'm so happy that so many women are taking interest in business and investing, and also are entrepreneurs. So it's very rare to talk to so many women at one go. And I think partly because of the Zoom call facilitation, we are able to see all women coming from all parts of the world. So good to talk to you. And I think, Rachna, you asked me to cover everything within half an hour, which is going to be a difficult task. You asked me to cover my life story. You asked me to cover the vision, the leadership style, as well as the macros for India. So let me see
so
how
you
much
can
I'm
go on.
able to
So we are not time bound, so it's fine. Sir.
Yeah, only thing I would like to, let me see if I'll try and cover everything as in a compact manner as I can. So I'll talk about my own story first, which is started many, many years back when I was just graduating from the college, just a plain graduate, nothing studied beyond that. And I joined the family business at a very young age of 20. And at that time, the business was run by my father and my uncles. And I was the first person from the next generation to join the business. It was a typically family managed business wherein all the decisions in the business were undertaken by the family. And there were a few acquaintances, few relatives which were helping the family, but it was located in the heart of commodity markets in Bombay, in Masjid Bandar, which is a very crowded locality. A lot of go downs, lack of parking space, very dirty, because we were mainly in commodities. And my father had taken the initiative to convert the company from commodities to manufacturing. So at that time, we had three different businesses. We had an edible oil business, we had a chemicals business, and we had a spice extracts business. And I was let loose. There was nobody guiding me in terms of what to do. And my father just said that, okay, you try and visit whatever factories, customers, and see what you can do. And in that journey of exploration, I started visiting all the three businesses, their factories, customers. And I realized that when I started looking at the edible oil business, which was mainly selling edible oils to industrial customers like paint companies, biscuit companies. And we were also selling coconut oil in bulk in tanker loads to a company in Calcutta. And they were packing it under their own brand. The brand name, I'm sure those who are based in Calcutta would have heard of the brand Shalimar. So we were selling in bulk to Shalimar in tanker loads. And I realized that, this business was not doing too well. If I'm able to convert their business from unbranded to branded. And my uncle and everybody started saying that, okay, how come, see how Shalimar is doing, we should be able to do things like that. So that maybe gave me some degree of hint in terms of what to do. And we had these two brands, Saffola and Parachute, but nobody was paying any attention to them. Very small base, doing a turnover of maybe 30-40 lakhs per annum. And nobody going to the market. But it so happened that some of our distributors in parts of Maharashtra and Gujarat were buying it on their own and selling it. And those pockets, the brand was doing well. And similarly, Saffola was being sold in certain pockets of Bombay and in Delhi. So out of just sheer curiosity, I went to these interior markets in Vidarbha and started visiting them and started seeing how the brands were doing. And in many cases, in those small towns, when I joined, there were no hotels, so I stayed with my distributors at their homes. But I actually went to the market, started retailing these products, and started seeing the result that, yes, this is something which excites me, and it's showing results. So that's how I made an entry into the consumer products. And initially, first few years, I started expanding distribution. First 1 or 2 years, I myself was doing everything. So started appointing distributors, and as we grew, we started recruiting talent. And over a period of time, we grew the business from 50 lakhs to something like 20 crores or so. And we expanded the distribution. It took me about 5 years to expand the distribution to all India basis, first West, and then went to South and North, and then East. And at that stage, sorry, we were stagnating. We got a market share in that segment of about 15-20%. And we said that if we really have to grow in this segment, coconut oil segment, we have to do something different. We have to do something which is innovative. And that's why then we came across an idea that if we can convert the market from tins to plastics. At that time, the whole market for coconut oil was in tins. So before taking any step to develop containers on plastic, we went to the trade, the retailers, and asked them, what do you think about it? And clearly they said that we will not sell coconut oil in plastics, because maybe 10 years prior to this, some other manufacturer had started coconut oil in plastic, which is a disaster, partly because the bottle which they had was a square-shaped bottle, and partly they had not done a very good job of packaging and a lot of oil on the external surface of the bottle. And when the retailer closed the shop and opened the next morning, all the rats had bitten away the bottles. So not only the product was gone, but also the shop was damaged. So we had a big negative from the trade. But we were convinced that plastics is the right way forward because plastics is cheaper than tins. It's more convenient to use in terms of a bottle compared to a tin. And it also looks better on the shelves. So we said that we cannot just give up and let's try and overcome this problem. And we went to our packaging vendor and told them to design a bottle which is difficult for the rat to take a grip. And that's how the round shaped bottle came in. And then we told our packaging department to ensure that not a single drop of oil should be on the outer surface of the bottle so that the rat cannot smell that there is coconut oil inside. And that got done. And then we tested this with in a rat cage for 1 or 2 days. We put a few bottles and a few rats. And we tested that and realized that this was working. And that gave us tremendous confidence that if you're able to do this in a rat cage, it can actually be done at the retail shelves. And with that confidence, we took pictures of our bottle with the rat in the rat cage and gave it to all our field force and told them that to show it to the retailers. And we went one step further in saying that if there is any damage caused to the bottles or the shop, we will repay them. So we went very aggressive, and I think that worked. And it took almost 4 or 5 years for us to convert the market from more than 5, 6, 7 years to convert the market from tins to plastics. Come winter and coconut oil freezes in cold weather, so people would go back to tins. So we had to design a wide mouth container. So, sorry, I've got a nice sore throat. So then, even in the sachet segment, we came out with a new innovation in coming out with a 1 rupee mini bottle. So all these innovations really helped, and our market share over a period of time from 15% jumped straight to 50%. And we became a market leader. And that just reinforced the belief in me that innovations can happen in any segment, even in a coconut oil segment where there is you cannot differentiate much. We adopted the route of packaging to innovate, and that worked for us. And then we realized once we gained market share, we realized that in Bangladesh, the whole market is again dominated by tins, by local brands. And it's a fairly big market of coconut oil, packed coconut oil in Bangladesh. And we said, we'll go there. And with whatever innovations we had done in India, we went all out in Bangladesh. And we did that much earlier. We converted the whole market in tins. And we have a 80% market share in Bangladesh market because of these innovations. Of course, the product quality also is very important. So we went overboard in ensuring that we selected the right quality of raw materials, treated them properly in our factory. And, you know, the aroma of coconut oil has to be very, very good. It has to be standard. So all those issues we did. But I think the key differentiation for us was the packaging route. And Bangladesh is a very big market. So we are the largest Indian company in Bangladesh. And again, innovations played a very important role. So the business grew. This business grew from 20 lakhs in around mid 70s to 20, 30 lakhs to almost 80 crores. And at that time, I realized that I was getting a little boxed in because by then 4 of my cousins had joined business. And it became too much of family members in the organization. And we had to recruit good quality talent, especially in our kind of business. In FMCG, talent plays a very, very important role. And if you have to recruit good quality talent in the area of brand building, sales, we have to look at companies like Levers or Procter & Gamble to attract talent from them. Many times people would just run away before coming to the office because if they were called for an interview to Masjid Bandar, to our office, it was so bad. Just getting into an office itself was a big task, you know. And half the people would just not come, saying that I'm not going to work in an organization where the office is located in such a congested place. So then I said that, okay, how can I overcome that? So I started calling them to the Wellington Club, which is in Bombay, one of the best clubs, for 1-2 meetings, and mentally started preparing them, saying that, okay, now. And then after that, once they were mentally prepared, we also gave them an assurance that it's a matter of time, we'll move out of Masjid Bandar. So I think that worked. So we started recruiting talent, but the family, so many family members was actually acting as a constraint to me, because three different businesses which did not have any synergies, allocation of money between different businesses, so many family members, and I was just getting constrained in terms of growing, because even if we made profits, and we were making good profits, I was not sure whether that money could be invested in my own business or it would go to some other business which was managed by some other family member. So I decided that if I really have to grow, then I needed to take out this business into a different company. And it took me almost 3 years to convince the family that please allow me to take this business in a different company, which will only do consumer products, because the culture required to succeed in the consumer products is very, very different than a culture required to succeed in a B2B business like a chemicals, or an export business, which was our spice extracts business. So I gathered my cousins and we debated a lot in terms of how do we become more independent. It was not a financial separation, it was just a management separation, where the financial interests remained the same, which was among the four different brothers, my father and three of his brothers. But it was a management separation, and that's how Marico was born. And at the same time, three, four other companies in the group were born, and each one was headed by one of my cousins, and we had to convince the elders to play some sort of a mentoring role and give us the freedom to do a operation on a day-to-day basis. And I think that really, looking back, was one of the most important decisions for me, because if I had not done that, or if I had done it in a hurried manner where there would have been disputes within the family, then I would have been still struggling, managing all the family dynamics. So I think it's very important, if you are in a family-owned business, family-managed business, to understand how the family dynamics work and have a lot of patience and work with the family to resolve issues. I know it is easier said than done, but as I said, I took almost 2-3 years to convince the family. But looking back, I think absolutely worth it, to spend 2-3 years. And I could have tried to do it within 3 or 6 months. It would have backfired on me, and I would have still been fighting the family issues internally. So this gave me, the formation of Marico gave me a great opportunity to attract a new team. And we were not known as a company. It was a new company. It just took over 2 brands of Bombay Oil, Parachute and Saffola. And the challenge was, how do you attract good talent in a new company? So we had to leverage on our existing brands of Saffola and Parachute. And we had very little budget to talk about the attractive opportunities in the company for new hires. So we briefed the advertising agency that we have limited money and we can have only 2 insertions. So they came up with a brilliant campaign which talked about 200 employees walk out of Bombay Oil, leveraging on the brands Saffola, Mask Killer, Nabbed. So these shock value ads really got attention, and I think in the job market, people realized that this seems to be an innovative company. And I think innovation advertising helped, and within a period of about a year or so, we recruited some like 30-40 senior managers from different backgrounds, from MNCs, from Indian companies. And the fact that 30-40 of them joined within a very short period of time led to a lot of chaos in terms of their way of working. Each one came with their own set of beliefs in terms of how to manage talent, how to manage products, what kind of products to go into, what happens to non-performers, how do you treat associates. And I realized that we needed to do something, because there are a lot of conflicting signals given by different managers for the same kind of problem. Each one behaved differently. And that led me to write down my own thoughts on these subjects, and I shared that with my team. And that evoked a very positive response. We involved the next 2 layers in terms of talking about our values, which got better structured, which also got value added, because I had also some blind spots. And then basically we arrived at our whole set of values with a lot of involvement. And I always say that involvement leads to commitment, and for key organizational processes, key organizational initiatives, it's very important to involve people, because in a values or a culture building journey, if you have some senior talent which says that these are Harsh's value and we don't agree with it, then the values will not percolate downwards. And it's very important that the top 2-3 layers of the management imbibes those values, owns those values, and lives those values. Because I've seen many organizations where values are pasted at the reception, but when you ask people down the line, what is the culture in the organization? I mean, there's a lot of skepticism, and I think people think that this is only just for show. I did not want that to happen, and for the first 2-3 years after Marico was born, I spent a lot of time in building on these values, identified gaps where we were lacking, and took steps to improve on these values. Now, values and culture in an organization is very, very critical. And according to me, it's a source of competitive advantage. But you have to take values seriously, and culture building is a very, very time-taking, painful kind of. It takes a lot of time to build a culture in an organization, on average 3 to 5 years. And I was prepared to do that. Also, values have to be designed in such a way which can help the organization. And for us, values of innovation very, very important. We have to have a culture of innovation if you want to drive innovation on a perpetual basis. So what does drive innovation is we started looking at that. And clearly, we realized that innovation happens when an organization is open, where people are free to talk to each other, where people can challenge their bosses, where there is a lot of trust, a lot of dialogue takes place between different functions, and it not go through a hierarchy. So we said that we want an organization which is a very flat organization, where people are empowered. We want very good talent, as well as a diverse set of talents, gender diversity, even educational diversity, coming in from different parts of the country. I think that's what brings in different types of thinking within an organization. And that's what drives innovation. So our values talked about openness, trust, removing the fear of failure, experimentation, prototyping, because we encourage people to experiment. Many times people think that all the answers can be got through market research, but market research has its own set of limitations, and no shortcut to testing it out with the consumer. So we encourage a lot of experimentation and prototype amongst our own people. And we also have to remove the fear of failure, because many times these experiments may not succeed. And if you start punishing those failures, then people will stop taking risks. So you have to remove the fear of failure. You have to encourage risk taking. You have to encourage prototyping, experimentation. You have to have an organization which is open, which is trusting. You have to have a diverse set of people. And our values covered all that. And just to give one or two examples, how did we drive openness within the organization? So at that time, then we had decided to move into a new office. And that happened in the year 1992. And the first brief given to the interior designer was that it should reflect openness. So people could see everybody else in the organization, even those who had cubicles or cabins, they could see, even including me. And I think that was one clear signal that it's open. We also had open houses at all our locations, wherein any workman also, and I went to all the locations every year, once a year, to talk about what happened last year in terms of our performance, what are our plans for next year. And then we had an open house where we asked people to, if they wanted to ask any questions, and even questions relating to their pay scale, their facilities, whatever else. So basically that drove a lot of openness within the organization. We also had relationship reviews where every team, the boss and the subordinates, would go to an outside location for 2 days and talked about how our relationships are. Because in an office environment, there's a lot of work pressure, and this just talking about relationships, not only with the boss, but at the peer level also. Because the relationships are good and open, then it's easier for me to tell somebody else on the face that this is something which you should have done it like this. And if I don't have that sense of openness, I will always start bitching behind that person's back and not tell that person. And that's the normal tendency, that, okay, you don't tell the person if you have any anything to do with that person, but you tell 20 other people that this fellow is like this. And we wanted to avoid that. So we had that. We also had open house. We also share a lot of information about our organization, which again reflects openness. The other value we have is trust. So we decided at that time to do away with muster in the office. So nobody had to sign a muster. We did away with the sick leave and the casual. We have time in the office, so nobody did away with the sick leave and office. If you don't have to leave, take a time in the office. Did away with, because if you're sick, we trust. I have some work and I will take leave. But there is no entitlement to sick leave and casual leave. You know, we trust you and you take it as and when you need. And we also did away with authorization of expenses, and we incurred on behalf of the company. So if you incur an authorization, a travel expense or telephone, so an expense which you are incurred for on behalf of the company, then normally in most so in some organization you have to go to the boss and get it approved. We said, no, we trust you. So we'll allow you self-authorization of expenditure. So these are all self-authorization steps again reinforce the values in the organization, reinforce national. I'm just giving you one or two examples like that. I can talk on the values for one. Giving you one or two examples. So people leaving and new people joining, how do you maintain that culture? So I think we spend a lot of time in new employees. They spend one full day in terms of understanding what happened in the area of culture building, what is our values, what are our cultures. We also do a study on values across the organization at all our locations. And when we realize that in some location it is low, the value, then when we acquire some company, then again we have to change the values. We set up a new factory, again we have to ensure that the values are lived by everybody. So I believe that values have played a very important role in driving innovation on a perpetual basis. And also it has helped us attract good talent, because when people enjoy working and when they have preference about the company, how is the company, and the reference would be either with an existing person who is within the organization or some person who is left. And we believe that all our talent who have left us are our brand ambassadors, and we go walk that extra mile in left ambassadors, and we go in ensuring that we are in touch with them. We call them to our events, and we had 1,000. We also link them through the IT and groups and things like that. And I think that's also played a very, very important role. Many of our people who have left, they've come back to us at a later stage, you know. The business back to us. This grew in Marico from 80 crores. So many they've come back. Grew in Marico grew from some difference over stakes. I bought over interest of two of my uncles and paid them, and that forced us to go public. And we went public in 1996. At that time, our price to earning multiple was 13. 96 at the price to earning multiple of 13. And immediately after that, we got competition from Levers. At that time, Levers had bought over Tata Oil Mills, and they were doing very well in all the categories. In their oral care, they were giving a lot of competition to Colgate, and they grabbed a lot of market share. And they actually wanted to acquire us. So they went on spreading a lot of word in the market, in their own analyst meet, and also being approached from different sites, different bankers, saying that please sell out. If you don't sell out, you will not be able to compete with Levers. Right? Saying you will not. It's absolutely clear that we will not sell out. And one stage, I got a phone call from the Levers chairman. I had never met him. And he said, Mr. Mariwala, why don't you sell out? All your future generations will be taken care of financially. And if you don't sell out, you will be history. We will wipe you out. I heard him, but I said, thank you. I don't want to sell out. So for whatever reason, I was confident that we'll be able to take them on. So we decided to take them on, and they, at that time, as I said, we had just gone public. We had to give a guidance to the markets that we have a strong competitor entering our field, and we have to protect our core business, Parachute, which was almost 60-70% of our turnover, and we will do whatever is required to protect. And so for 1 or 2 years, don't expect too much growth in our profits. We will overinvest in our advertising. We took them on 4 different fronts. We grew our distribution, because at that time we were mainly not in rural markets. So we had to appoint super distributors to enter rural markets, because Levers was strong in those markets. We had to create advertising which was appealing to the consumer, and we came up with a very highly emotional ad campaign which talked about the benefits of coconut oil and the auspiciousness of coconut in Indian households. When you enter a house, you break a coconut, and when you get married, you again break a coconut. So basically, I connected that to the brand Parachute, and that worked wonderfully well. We increased our ad budgets, and finally, we had to take care of our own field force and distributors' field force, because there was a lot of issue of morale that how this promoter is taking on such a large giant, so there was a lot of fear of getting impacted. So we had to call our field force and distributors' field force to an outside location, and we actually created like a war room scenario where you had to enter the conference through a tunnel and look like a war, and we had to give them a lot of ammunition like bombs, and these are all symbolic things, but basically saying that we will take on Levers and we will succeed. I think that was very important to increase the motivation, morale of our field force. So Levers launched, and maybe 4 times they relaunched the product. They got market share, but not at our cost. So they went up to a 12% market share, but we did not lose any market share. And I think that it went on for 4 or 5 years. And at some stage, Levers started losing interest in this category. And their market share started falling from 12%. It fell to about 7-8%. And I used to meet the subsequent chairman of Levers on the golf course and played golf with them also, and told them that, why are you continuing with this brand? If you're not investing, sell it off. I always thought that the brand will come to us. He will tell us, okay, take over the brand and arrive at a valuation. But sadly, I was wrong. They decided to put the brand on the block, and they invited bids from all the other players. And there were like 5 players in Indian, like from us, Dabur, Godrej, I think Wipro, Imami, everybody wanted to buy that brand. And we were very clear that this brand is very, very strategic to us, because if some other player came in, we would have newer competitor. This brand was strong in the East. Relatively, our market share was not so much in the East. So then it would improve our market share. It would reduce competition to us. And we knew this business inside out. So we also saw opportunity for reducing cost in terms of raw material buying, packaging cost, and things like that. So we went very aggressive in terms of our bid. We won the bid. We were way above others. We said that this is a strategic acquisition for us. For strategic acquisition, we should not try and optimize our bid, because many times we start guessing that, okay, what others will quote, so let's quote this much. But my board gave me a clear direction that you go all the way. If you lose that bid, then you should not repent that you underquoted. But don't try and say, okay, I will do 170 crores. And so we bought, the valuation kept to 215 crores, and we decided to bid for the full value. And all others were in the range of 150, 160. Even if you are at 170 or so, much higher, a little bit higher than them, then again, Levers would have called us and started negotiating between the 2 parties. But the fact that we are way ahead of them, I think the deal was in our hands. I think that was a great source of inspiration, motivation for our own people. So from getting acquired to a multinational, we acquired that brand. And looking back, that has been our best acquisition, if you ask me. Today, This happened in the year, I think, 2006. And we paid 215 crores for that brand. And today we must be making profit of more than 215 crores in this brand itself. So the brand, if you had to value today, it would be worth maybe 4,000-5,000 crores. And also the benefits on Parachute in terms of pricing, things like that. So we have used acquisition as a way to grow. We acquired some other brands also later. We acquired a business in Vietnam. We acquired Setvet and Livon also. So both organic as well as inorganic has been our way to grow. Over a period of time, we've grown international. So currently we are present in Bangladesh, all the Middle East markets, Vietnam, Egypt, and South Africa. And then other markets we are exporting from India. So over a period of time, the business has grown from what it was. The first year of Marico, we did turn over 100 crores. And now this year, hopefully we'll do about 7,500 crores or so. We have shifted the business from commodities to FMCG. We went from a low margin to high margin, from India to international, from private to public, from a low price to earning multiple of 13 falling to 7. Now we are in the range of, I don't know how much is it today, but around 40 or so. And from a market cap of when we announced our IPO, which was 180 crores. So today in the range of about 46,000 crores. So it's worked out well. And if I had to sum up what has worked for us and what could work for any entrepreneur or any businesses, I would say the following things. One is, I think you have to create a strong right to win in whatever you're doing. You can't be a Me Too player in a highly competitive environment. And if I look back at my portfolio of products, in all our products, either most of them, and 95% of our products, we are market leaders. And then market leadership has come either because we have pioneered a segment like Revive, or we also started a chain of skincare clinics under Kaya Skin Clinics, or when we launched Saffola, which is a pioneering product, or when we innovated, like in case of Parachute and a few other brands. So either innovation or pioneering initiative have helped us in becoming a market leader. When you are a market leader, then you get a certain critical mass. You also have a pricing power. So because of that, your returns on capital employed, your returns on equity improve. And I think we have what RO, return on equity of, I don't know exactly, 40-45%. And so we have a lot of cash which gets generated, and which again, if it is not required, we believe in distributing it to our shareholders. So I think our dividend payout ratio is in the range of about 80% plus. The other thing which has worked for us is talent and culture. It's very, very important. So when I started, there is hardly any capital we used. We had those 2 factories, small factories in edible oil. And from there we've grown, and everything has been funded internally. So I think that has helped. I would say talent plays a very, very important role in any organization. And not just attracting good talent, but creating the right culture where the talent can actually perform well. So I think talent culture has played a very, very important role. And third thing I would like to talk about is governance. I think governance plays a very, very important role in any organization. And governance is actually relevant not only for large organizations, but from the starting point of a business. If you start taking shortcuts, it'll hit you at some stage. And I, for one, believe that the strong trust on governance has played a very, very important role in our success in terms of attracting talent, attracting good board of directors, attracting good associates. And today the market also rewards well-governed companies. So I would say that governance has played a very, very important role, and all businessmen should take governance seriously from day one, and not some people think that governance should be addressed only when you become large, but it doesn't happen that way. Once you build a certain culture where you start taking shortcuts, it will be very difficult to change that culture. And separately, it may hit you somewhere, because if you've taken some shortcut and if you get caught, they'll put you back by a few years. So it's better to do things in the right way, in the legal way. And luckily in our segment of business, it's deregulated, and I've hardly gone to Delhi for getting any license or any permission. And thank God for that. I have not had to go to the politicians nor have I donated a single paisa to any political party in my own journey. When I I like that because, I don't want to be accountable or to go to people begging for favors and, also giving donations and things like that. So I think these are the things I wanted to share. And it's almost like 45 minutes. So maybe if any of you have questions, then I'll just increase the volume.
Yes, absolutely, sir. So thank you for sharing your motivating story and what an incredible journey you had. Very inspiring, sir, and a great message that innovation is the key. And your belief in the brand value, that speaks volumes about your journey. And from here, sir, I would like to bring in Namita. Namita, if you could take few questions from the members.
Yes.
See, now the echo has stopped, huh? So
Yeah, it's perfectly all right.
Yeah.
No echo at all.
Yeah.
So from being acquired to acquiring an MNC brand, truly a success story as a homegrown FMCG product. From 15 to 50, you have proved that innovation can happen in any segment, sir. So thank you for sharing that story. I'd like to bring in Jyoti Wadhwa at this point. Jyoti?
Yes, thank you, Namita. Jai Shri Krishna, Harish Bhai.
Jai Shri
You are
Krishna.
an institution in yourself.
Oh my God. Don't.
Handling family business and going to the professional way. You are an icon. And I hope you're writing a book on this because this will help a lot of families across the globe to do it in a most organized and a patient way. Bimal Thakkar is one of your, he really looks up and idolizes you in this. So I would really, I'm waiting for your book to come. Thank you so much.
So just to answer that, I just announced before we began this talk that, I have a meeting with my wife only, not a meeting, but internal, we had decided that we'll meet at 4. She's helping me write the emotional. I am not too emotional as a person. She tries to take out the emotions from me in terms of all the issues about family separation and things like that. So that book is almost ready. I think we'll publish. I'm waiting for things to open up and we will launch it early next year, I think.
All the best for it and God bless
And I've also
you.
decided the name of the book, which is a pun on me. It's Harsh Reality.
Oh, wow. That's great.
Beautiful.
Thank you so much.
Our
Love
next discussion will be on your book, sir.
Okay, done.
It will be a privilege for us.
Done.
Sachi, you had a question? Sachi Singhania?
Hi, sir. Thank you for your insights. So actually, I wanted your advice, like coming from startups and young entrepreneurs like us who want to launch something in the FMCG space. So of course, we never have deep pockets like the big giants. So obviously, because of that, do you think it should be such a big setback for us that we're always scared, or how do you think we can go from?
It's a good question. I think first of all, before you launch, you have to be very clear that it is either innovative or pioneering. If you launch a Me Too product which is available and sold by others, the chances of your success are very, very low. On low prices, I think you cannot sustain a brand. So all I'm saying is, I hope that you have a proposition which is differentiated compared to others, and it appeals to the likely consumer. So I would say that you test out whatever you have with your likely customers and just get feedback. If you have one, then I think some of the entry barriers which were happening in the FMCG have gone down. And the biggest entry barriers in the past were distribution, where you had to distribute it to so many shops and you had to appoint distributors, and for a new product it was impossible to get distribution. And number two, the money you have to put into create awareness in advertising through television and press. Now these two entry barriers have gone because of emergence of digital options. You have an e-commerce where you can launch your product through Amazon or Nykaa, or depending on the kind of product you are in, and you can do digital advertising, which does not require two big budgets. So I think it's a fantastic opportunity for new entrepreneurs to create new brands, and we've seen many new brands which have emerged in the last few years because these two entry barriers have vanished. We have just acquired a brand. The name of the brand is Beardo. It's actually making products for the beard. And this was again promoted by two entrepreneurs from Ahmedabad. And it's already doing a turnover, I think, about 90 crores. So we just acquired it. And then many other brands are there. There's one Mamaearth, which I know many of you have heard. They make products for children, and then they want to. So many innovative organizations, many innovative brands have come up. So if you have innovative now, you should launch it through e-commerce. You can also do it through modern retail chains. If you tie up with a modern retail chain, if you have an innovative. So whether it's DMart or whether it is a Reliance or whichever one, I think you can tie up and then ensure that your product is sold in these chains. But to go to the traditional distributors, it'll be very tough unless you have a certain critical mass. Some of our products get sold in like number of outlets, 40 lakh outlets in India. So it's difficult for you, and the cost of maintaining the field force, it's huge. We must be spending, I don't even know, must be 200-300 crores a year just having so many field people and all, and you're able to. So that is not doable in the near future. Once you get a certain critical mass, one could do that. But initially, I would say prototype that in one chain, a modern retail chain, or one e-commerce site, and see the response. Do some digital advertising, and if it works, then try and expand.
Thank you, sir. Really helpful advice. Thank you, sir.
Sir, if you could move little back, sir, we would like to see you.
Oh, let me see. I'm not. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Now it's fine. Now it's perfect.
So I'd like to bring in Sushila Jain. Sushila.
Okay.
Good afternoon, sir.
Hi.
Yeah. Looking at the current scenario of the COVID-19,
Yes.
is Marico adopting the strategy of stepping back from other segments and focusing more on health and hygiene?
Yes. Clearly, there is a change in the consumer behavior. So in our range of products, we had, before COVID came in, we had decided to promote a lot of products in the area of personal care, male grooming. Brands like Livon, we have a Set Wet brand, which is for hair gels, hair creams. We also have, we had launched a brand under the Kaya Youth. And I think that has, to some extent, taken a back seat. And the new initiative we undertaken in the last 2-3 months, we launched a new product. We are the first ones to launch what we call Veggie Clean. It's a cleanser for cleaning fruits and vegetables, and it destroys all the viruses. It's a natural product, and we are the first ones to launch. And now after us, I think everybody else is launching, including ITC, Dabur. But I think we see that good traction for that particular brand. We have also gone into sanitizers, and we will add many more newer initiatives in this. We just launched honey. So yes, the overall consumer expectation because of COVID has shifted from personal care to health and hygiene. Our brand Saffola also stands for health, and that has also done well. So we have to look at what are the changes in the environment, what are the changes in consumer expectations, habits, and we have to develop products and launch them quickly to encash on the opportunity available.
Thank you.
So we know you have a very important meeting with a very important person.
No, you can cut it.
Okay. I'd like to bring in Sananda.
Yeah. So I just had a question. Before you decide to buy a product or launch a product, do you benchmark its margins, that you want a minimum of so much margins?
We look at what could be the margins. It may not be when we launch it, but over a period of 1 or 2 years, but we see what could be the sustainable margins in a category. I think that some idea when you do projections, you should plan. Normally, the margin in food is lower than the margin in personal products. So normally, gross margins in food is in the range of 25 to 30%. And in personal products, it is much higher in the range of around 40% or so, 40 to 50%. So I think that's the rough benchmarks we work on. But it need not be from day one, because when you launch, you don't want to spend too much energy in improving margins. Margin improvements can take place once you get a certain critical mass. Then you get economies of scale also. Then you can look at saving costs like packaging cost and things like that. So yes, to answer your question, we should have visibility of achieving a certain margins over a period of time once you get a critical mass. But all the efforts in the initial phase should go into ensuring that the product succeeds in the marketplace.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Sir, Vinita Pitti from Hyderabad has a question.
Yeah.
Vinita?
Sir, in this amazing journey of yours,
Did you face any challenges? And if so, how did you overcome them?
Challenges it's a continuous, every day is a challenge. So, I mean, it's a big question. I don't know how to answer it, but I've had many failures. Let me put it that way.
The worst challenge possible?
I think the biggest challenge I faced were when we had to disband from Bombay Oil to Marico. The second biggest challenge was in terms of family separation, and third biggest was to go public, because the market was very bad at that time, and we had to come out with an issue at a high price, and I had already paid my uncles. It was a staggered payment kind of a thing, and I had to borrow money at very high levels of interest of 18 in the year 96 or so. And my shares were with them in escrow, and if we were not able to go public, then I would have lost the control of the company. So that was another challenge. The levers thing was another challenge which I talked about. So multiple challenges and acquisitions. Each acquisition is a different set of challenges in terms of integration. So lots and lots of challenges. But I think challenge is something which everybody loves. And growth, I am very growth focused. So I strongly believe that growth should come first, and after that the profits will follow if you are on the right segment. So again, in the earlier question which was raised, I would first go for growth, and as long as I know that I'll be able to make those healthy margins, I would initially go for growth and then try and make up on margins. Because if you start going on margins first, as I said, then growth may not happen,
Sir, I know you haven't restricted yourself to only Marico. Once you gave up the MD-ship, you've grown beyond that. And innovation, I know, is very dear to you. So you advocate innovation in all
Yes.
spheres.
So
what I want to understand is, what are the other innovations that you're working on? What are the innovations that you're working on beyond Marico?
So in Marico, I can't talk about, because these are likely future, shall I say, launches, and we would not like to share that with, otherwise there is a fear that will go to competitors. So I'm sorry, we never mention what we will do in future in terms of, because normally no organization will talk about it. But
so beyond Marico.
In terms of innovations, I would say that we have started a Marico Innovation Foundation. And the objective of the foundation is to fuel innovation in India. And we have innovation awards, which happen once in 2 years. We support innovative organizations to scale up, and on average, we work with 12 to 14 organizations. I personally get involved in helping these organizations scale up. When COVID happened, we launched a program for attracting innovations for COVID, and we announced a prize money of 2.5 crores. And we got 600 entries specifically in the area of PPE equipment and ventilators. And we had a jury, which was a very, very competent independent jury, and they have finalized the winners both for PPE as well as ventilator. The totally 6 organizations have made the cut, and they have got grants totaling to about 2.5 crores. And post that, we have given publicity to them. We are also helping them scale up. So these are all organizations which are, if you go to the Marico Innovation Foundation website, you'll get to see who all have won and why they have won. But to say that all these organizations are affordable solutions, and they're innovative, and they can be scaled very fast. So I'm quite happy with what we've done in this area. A lot of innovative social organizations also we have supported in the past, and I think they play a role in creating innovations in the society and not necessarily for business.
What a wonderful way of driving innovation, sir.
Thank you.
Just the last couple of questions. Sushma?
Yeah.
Sushma Kataruka?
So this year, Rachna, we will have our innovation function. Actually, it was supposed to be on 17th of March, and because of COVID, we had to cancel it at the last moment.
Okay, sir.
So this year, we are thinking of doing it on Zoom, and maybe if you can send me the list of people who would be interested in attending, I can send them the invite.
Absolutely,
but I can tell you that you'll enjoy that. It's really one of the most looked after functions in Bombay. On average, we have about 1,000 to 1,200 people attending, and there's a clamor for invitation. So there is a lot of innovative food and all that, but all that I will not serve. But
Yes,
I
sir.
think this will give us an opportunity to reach a wider audience.
That will be a big opportunity, sir. That will be a
So
big
you can send
opportunity.
me. This will happen sometime in, we have not decided the date, but
Okay.
sometime between September to November.
Sure, sir. Sure, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Right.
Ready?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah, Sushma.
Yes.
Okay. So you just
Sushma has some network issues. Sirisha, you can come in. Sushma, you can write your question.
Nanda's answered that.
Sirisha, you can come in. Sushma?
Yes.
Sushma, just type in your question, Sushma, please.
Yeah, Sirisha.
So good evening. First of all, I'd like to congratulate for an excellent ad that you all have come up for Parachute. It's a very, very good ad which is touching the chord. My question is that I interact with a lot of young girls and my nieces and all. They have a little bit of a block when it comes to consuming coconut oil. The product has to stand the test of time. So how do you do it? I mean, innovation definitely, but in terms of presenting your brand to the end customer. So, isn't that a challenge?
So, I think luckily mothers are very, very, they have bought into our story in terms of benefits. So, you're talking for hair, right?
Yes, the brand,
so
Parachute.
Story, the benefits of oiling, and we've done lots of research in terms of benefits of oiling also. So, I think the mother plays a very important role. And when a girl reaches teens at that time, then, but now you come out with many other whole range of hair care products, which are non-greasy, which are better sensorials if somebody doesn't like coconut oil. So there are many Parachute extensions. We also have hair and care. We have Shanti Amla. We have Livon Serum. So I think we have been able to offer a variety of choices to the consumer, and depending on the consumer, they can decide what option works best for them.
Thank you.
So thank you so much for all the questions that you've answered patiently.